Hello, welcome to PCAP's Native Prairie Speaker Series. My name is Kayla Mroz-Sailer, and I am the Stewardship Coordinator with Saskatchewan Prairie Conservation Action Plan, or PCAP. Today, Kayla Caruso will be speaking about Chaplin Lake, a shorebird hotspot in the prairies. I'd like to start by stating we respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations and communities, past and present. For millennia, they have worked to protect these landscapes and the life these areas sustain. I would like to thank these original caretakers and acknowledge the ongoing work and presence of Indigenous peoples in Canada today. And before we get going, I'd like to note that PCAP's Native Prairie Speaker Series is a monthly presentation about anything to do with Native Prairie conservation or species at risk. And stay tuned for details about our winter webinar lineup. You'll be able to register for that on our website. And past webinar presentations can be found on our PCAP YouTube channel. And this webinar will be uploaded there in the near future. A reminder to all of our listeners out there, if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type it into the questions section of the webinar dashboard at any time during the presentation. I'd like to take a moment to note that financial support for today's webinar is provided by our presenting sponsors, Canadian Forage and Grasslands Association, Eco-Friendly West, Enbridge, Information Services Corporation, Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association, SaskTel, and Wildlife Habitat Canada. In-kind support has been provided by the University of Saskatchewan. So a little bit about today's presenter. Kayla is a student at the University of Saskatchewan studying shorebird population trends. She graduated from the University of Waterloo in 2021 with a BES in Environment, Resources and Sustainability. And throughout her undergraduate degree, Kayla completed several co-op placements in Saskatchewan, igniting her passion for shorebirds and leading her to pursue a Master's of Science. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Kayla. Are you there, Kayla?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, sorry, I was just getting everything set up. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today to give you some information on Chaplin Lake. It's a really unique place that's close to my heart. I'm hoping to teach you a little bit about why it's so special and why it's so special to the birds that rely on this lake during their incredible journeys.
We don't see your screen yet.
Oh, you don't?
No. I know when we tested this, it was super smooth.
Yeah. Here, let me unshare, and then can you ask me to share it again? Sorry.
Yeah, let's try it one more time here. Perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Every time I hit this, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
So first, I just want to give you some background information on Chaplin. Chaplin is located along Highway 1 between Swift Current and Moose Jaw, and you know you're getting close to Chaplin when you start to see piles of salt along the highway, and you also start to notice a kind of briny smell, which isn't all that pleasant. When you go to Chaplin in the summer, it can be a little disorienting because the salt kind of looks like snow. And when you're in the landscape, it almost feels like you're walking on the moon because of all the salt that's there. So Chaplin is a super cool environment because of all the salt and also all the birds that rely on it. And Chaplin is also one of the largest saline lakes in Canada, which makes it important for wildlife as well as industry. So this is kind of an example of what all of that salt looks like, and you can see it's kind of snow-like. So Chaplin Lake also doubles as a sodium sulfate mine. So it's not only important for shorebirds, but important for humans as well. Sodium sulfate, in case you're unsure of what that is and what we use it for, it's used in detergents, pulp and paper, glass, and livestock minerals, as well as some other uses. The mining of sodium sulfate at Chaplin Lake began in 1948, and it continues until this day. The mining at Chaplin gives Chaplin Lake unique characteristics compared to other saline lakes in the area. First, the lake is divided into several basins, which you can see here, and it's divided by dike roads. This is so that the mine can move water between the basins in order to extract that sodium sulfate. The mining activity actually helps to stabilize the water in the lake, making it a more permanent feature on the landscape. Without the mine, the lake would naturally go through wet and dry periods, and depending on the year, in some years it might be completely dry, and in some years it would be very wet. So the mine kind of helps to stabilize that water level, and this stabilization may actually make the lake more attractive to shorebirds because it's a relatively permanent feature on the landscape. In the previous slide, I mentioned that Chaplin is a saline lake. So you might have some questions about what saline lakes are and how they're formed. So saline lakes are relatively common globally and make up 44% of all lake volume. So almost half of the lakes on Earth are saline. They're generally found in arid to semi-arid regions. So they're super common in drier regions of Asia, Australia, and Africa. In Canada, we also have a large amount of saline lakes. However, they are mostly restricted to the Prairie provinces as well as interior BC. So how exactly did these lakes get so salty? So the main reason for the high salt content in Chaplin Lake and other saline lakes in the prairies is the environment that they exist in. So Chaplin is located in a semi-arid area, and the rates of evapotranspiration, in case you're unsure of what evapotranspiration is, it is the water that is evaporated from water sources on the ground into the atmosphere. So the rate of evapotranspiration is higher than the rate of precipitation. So more water is being evaporated from the lake than is coming in through precipitation in overall. That means that and then the area also has a naturally high amount of minerals due to geological processes. So when we have high amounts of minerals as well as high amounts of evapotranspiration, the water, as you can kind of see in this little diagram here, is evaporated into the atmosphere, but the salt remains. And then when it rains, more salt can be pushed into these basins from the surrounding landscape. So as the water evaporates, it just becomes kind of saltier and saltier, and then that salt will eventually precipitate out onto the landscape, and then when it rains, it can wash minerals in, but then the salt will be reabsorbed by the water. So this constant evapotranspiration and wetting and drying process leads to that concentration of high amounts of salt in the water. Saline lakes, because of this, are very dependent on precipitation, so the water levels will fluctuate heavily from year to year, depending on how much rain, snow, and hail is received in the region. But because of the mining operation at Chaplin, some of the variation at Chaplin is minimized. So I've given you kind of some background information on Chaplin, so I'll go into more about the species that call this lake home, even if they're just passing through. So Chaplin is home to many bird species, including waterfowl like ducks and geese, cranes, swans, and herons. Grassland songbirds also utilize the grasslands surrounding Chaplin Lake. The stars of the show, however, are definitely shorebirds who flock in the hundreds of thousands every year. So shorebirds are a very diverse group of birds in the order Charadriformes. There are over 217 species of shorebird globally and 81 species of shorebird in the Americas. As you can see in the image below, shorebirds come in a wide variety of shapes, sizes, bill shapes. Some can be relatively large, like the long-billed curlew, and some can be pretty small, like the semi-palmated plover, sorry. There is such a range in shorebird morphology because they utilize different habitats and specialize in different foods. So shorebirds can be found in a wide variety of habitats, including marshes, rocky beaches, pristine sandy beaches, and on expansive mudflats like we see at Chaplin. They generally have different bill shapes indicating how they feed. So avocets, for example, have kind of an upturned bill, and they feed by scraping their bill through the mud side to side and kind of get the invertebrates through the sides of their bill. It's really funny to watch. If you ever have a chance to just sit and stare at an avocet, I would recommend. They're hilarious. And then the shorter bills, like the semi-palmated sandpiper, are used for probing at the mud, looking for invertebrates in the mud. And then phalaropes, this here is a Wilson's phalarope, they have really slender, skinny bills, and they have a really interesting way of feeding, which I will show you here. So they actually, maybe I won't show you because this doesn't want me to click. There we go. So they spin in circles, And they do this to create a vortex underneath them, which drives all of the invertebrates from the bottom of the lake up where they can kind of pick at them on the surface of the water. I could literally just watch them do this all day. I think it's so cool that they're able to do this. And yeah, that slender bill kind of helps them to pick at those invertebrates from the water. And these are Wilson's phalaropes, and this was taken at Chaplin. So another key element of many shorebirds is their incredibly long migrations. Birds generally migrate to take advantage of food surpluses in other locations. So shorebirds time their migrations so that their young hatch. So shorebirds that breed in the Arctic time their migrations so that their young will hatch during peak insect abundances. Shorebirds that use stopover sites will also time those so that they arrive at their stopover sites when prey species are most abundant. And shorebirds generally migrate from their wintering grounds in the winter up to their breeding grounds in the spring and summer. Many of these birds winter in South America and fly all the way up to the Arctic to breed, which makes them pretty incredible. In some cases, the round trip from these flights from basically the bottom of the world to the top can be over 32,000 kilometers every year. In order to survive these incredible flights, shorebirds require stopover sites to rest and refuel for the next leg of their journey. Chaplin acts as a stopover site for thousands of shorebirds yearly, and the birds that use Chaplin as a stopover site spend most of their time eating and putting on enough weight for the rest of their journey. For many long-distance migrants, Chaplin simply acts as a gas station, allowing them to rest between flights. For others, however, Chaplin is a breeding ground and acts as a nursery, and the birds will stay, breed, and raise their young at Chaplin. Chaplin is just one stopover site in a network of important sites that shorebirds use during migration. Without these kind of stepping stones, shorebird migration would not be possible. Because shorebirds undergo such long migrations, they're experiencing pretty steep population declines. As a group, they are declining very quickly. Just under grassland birds, they're declining at 37%. They've declined 37% since the 1970s. While we don't fully understand the causes of these declines, it is generally attributed to climate change and human development causing habitat loss. Shorebirds are expected to be hit harder by climate change as they utilize the Arctic, which is a region that is experiencing a higher degree of warming than elsewhere on the planet. This alters their breeding habitat and potentially causes a mismatch in the timing of migration compared to when insect abundances in this region peak. Climate change is also impacting the saline lakes that shorebirds use during migration. Climate models of the Prairie region indicate that things are going to get warmer and drier with climate change, which will lead to more evapotranspiration and the potential drying of many of the Prairie lakes, which means that shorebirds have less habitat to stop over and breed on when they're flying through. Development is also putting pressure on smaller lakes and wetlands that they utilize during migration, and many of these are being drained to increase the amount of productive farmland. Shorebirds, a smaller threat that they face is hunting pressure. Some regions in South America still hunt shorebirds, and that is contributing to their decline as well. So now I've talked a bit about shorebirds, a bit about their life cycle and their threats. I want to focus now on the shorebirds at Chaplin Lake. So Chaplin is home to over 20 species of shorebird that either pass through or breed in the area. Those that breed at Chaplin can breed directly on the shoreline, like the piping plover, but they can also nest in surrounding grasslands and use, like the marbled godwit or the willet, and utilize Chaplin for food. So you might be wondering why exactly shorebirds decide to stop at Chaplin. Well, as I mentioned before, the mining operations ensure that there is usually water on the lake, which makes it appealing to shorebirds, where in some years some of the other lakes in the area might dry out, so Chaplin is kind of a consistent source of water. And then Chaplin also has high concentrations of shrimp brine and other invertebrates, making it an ideal place to stop and grab a meal. Chaplin not only draws an impressive number of shorebird species, the birds that congregate at Chaplin also congregate in very large numbers. If you're out at Chaplin, the most numerous species that you'll see are probably semi-palmated sandpipers, redneck phalaropes, Wilson's phalaropes, and sanderling. Chaplin is of particular importance to sanderling, and an estimated 25% of the North American sanderling population use Chaplin Lake as a stopover site. So a big portion of sanderling rely on Chaplin Lake as a stopover site as they journey to the Arctic. So because Chaplin sees such high numbers of shorebirds, it has been classified as a Western Hemispheric Shorebird Reserve Network site, or WSRN site. It's kind of a mouthful. The Western Hemispheric Shorebird Reserve Network is a network of sites that they aim to conserve and protect shorebird habitat in South, Central, and North America. So WSRN sites can be wintering grounds, breeding grounds, and stopover sites that are important to shorebirds. WSRN currently has 111 sites in 18 countries. So by having this network of connected sites, they help to conserve more habitat for shorebirds. Chaplin is classified as a WSRN site of hemispheric importance, and it's classified alongside Old Wives Lake and Reed Lake. So these are kind of all classified as one area. And it was classified in 1997, and it is listed as hemispherically important because it had over 500,000 shorebirds stopping there annually, and the 25% of North American sanderling is also a very impressive statistic for this lake. There are two other WSRN sites in Saskatchewan, and those are Last Mountain Lake and the Quill Lakes up here, and Chaplin is located down there. And this map just shows you all of the numerous sites that WSRN has worked to conserve. So Chaplin helps to make up part of this. So I'm gonna get into my project a little bit. So Chaplin is just one of my 15 study lakes. And my goal in my project is to compare current shorebird numbers to historic counts to determine the level of population decline, and then also evaluate changes in habitat over time to see if those changes significantly impact shorebird counts. So I'm comparing the historic counts of shorebirds that I have are from reports that were done in the late 1990s, kind of comparing those numbers to current numbers. I haven't actually finished my statistical analysis yet, so I don't have full data to provide on that. And then the habitat analysis that I'm doing is also comparing the habitat from the 1990s to current habitat to see how that has changed, and if the changes in habitat are significantly impacting shorebird numbers, or if the shorebirds are just declining regardless of habitat at these small sites. So taking this map with a grain of salt, because I am not complete in my habitat analysis, this just kind of shows you, specifically at Chaplin, the change that can occur over such a long period of time. So as you can see here, there is much more shoreline at Chaplin in 1995 and much less water compared to 2021. And that's kind of one of the main factors that I'm looking at. There's also some differences in the amount of crop and pasture that's around the lake. The second part of my project is looking into how to survey shorebirds using drones and whether that's even possible. So we did a pilot study at Chaplin Lake, Reed Lake, and then Luck Lake, which is a bit further north, to determine if shorebirds can be surveyed using drones. So the goals of this study were, one, to determine if shorebirds react negatively to drones, if they have any behavior like flushing, if they just leave the area when the drone is around. We wanted to see how the drones impacted shorebird behavior, and then also understanding the best altitude and photo resolution for shorebird ID, as well as counting the shorebirds in the photos. And then third, we were comparing the ground counts to we'll be comparing ground counts to drone counts to see how accurate each method is in counting the number of birds in the area. So in order to do this, the drone work, to classify behavior, I recorded behavior every 2 minutes while the drone was in flight, and it was classified on a 0 to 3 scale. So if there was no flushing, it would be recorded as a 0. If less than 10% of the flock in the drone camera area was flushed, it would be 10%. 1 would be less than 10%, and then 2 would be 10 to 50% flushed, and 3 is greater than 50% were flushed. These movements were further classified into A, the shorebirds flushed, but then they came back to the same area, or B, the birds left the area. So an example of this would be if less than 10% of them flushed, but they left the area, they just kind of flew to a different lake or a different basin, or were no longer in the drone view, then that would be classified as a 1B. So to test, we were also looking at which altitudes would be best for drone imagery. So we selected 15 meters, 20 meters, and 30 meters. These were selected as they were thought to have minimal impact on the shorebirds underneath them, as well as still providing us with the amount of information needed to identify the shorebirds. And then ground surveys were completed either before or after each drone survey. This was randomized to kind of compare the drone counts and species ID to the ground counts and species ID, and kind of see if they're close to each other, and I'm hoping that they will be. I recently got my drone imagery back, so I will be diving into that soon. This is just a drone image that I think is really interesting. So there are a few birds here. These are sanderling and then some phalaropes, but you can see all of these little lines in the photo. When I was looking at these photos initially, I thought that the lines were kind of marks on, like they were just how Chaplin looked on the bottom of the lake, but it turns out it's actually little pathways made by all of the shorebirds that are going through the area. So I just think this is super neat, and it's so cool to see like the impact that they make on the lake is such a broad scale with all these little pathways going through, and I just think it's super neat. So I wanted to share that. So there are those were my 2 projects. There are some other ongoing projects at Chaplin Lake. There are long-term shorebird surveys that have been going on since 2014. These are being done to kind of fully understand how the populations of shorebirds at Chaplin are changing. Shorebird banding also regularly happens at Chaplin in the spring. This is to kind of see where the birds at Chaplin are coming from and where they're going. And then there's also another project ongoing that is investigating the importance and availability of those brine shrimp for sanderling, and how the mining activity influences the distribution of brine shrimp, and how that then influences where the shorebirds are and how many shorebirds there are. Thank you so much, and let me know if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you. That was great. It's clear you're very passionate about shorebirds, so thanks for sharing all that knowledge and enthusiasm with us. To any of our attendees, if you have any questions, feel free to type it into the question section of the webinar dashboard. And if you're watching from a cell phone today, just send it to the organizer by the chat. So first question is about the drone. Is it you that's driving the drone, or do you have somebody else assisting you?
No, we did have other people from Environment and Climate Change Canada that came out, and they, because we were using a pretty expensive drone. It's a Matrice octocopter, so it's a pretty good drone, and I don't know how to fly a drone personally, unfortunately. So yeah, we had other people come out and do that for us.
And do you need to get any special permits or anything for the drone?
Yeah, we did get permits for the drone. But it wasn't, they weren't that intensive. It was just like your basic permit saying we're gonna fly over the birds, and that's, yeah.
Perfect. A listener named Charlene is wondering, what are some solutions to increasing populations?
So I think one of the main solutions is the conservation of habitat and ensuring that shorebirds have enough habitat, both in their wintering grounds as well as stopovers when they're kind of flying on those really long migrations. So yeah, I think conserving habitat is probably the best way that we can increase shorebird numbers, and making sure that habitat is not contaminated and it's good quality.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of work to kind of coordinate different jurisdictions together.
Yeah, that's kind of WZURN is really a really good organization, as they kind of connect all of the countries that are in the Americas, and like they conserve sites in different points throughout North America
Mhm.
and South America. So that kind of creates that connection and helps um, jurisdictions maybe work together kind of through them.
Perfect. Thanks for that answer. Um, Ingrid says she doesn't think she saw a list of the 20 species that you mentioned. Do you have a list handy by chance? Should be interested in seeing that.
I don't know if I have one super handy. I could send it to you once I don't. Yeah, I don't have one super handy right now.
No.
But
um,
if you, I don't know if there's any way to contact people after the webinar, but I
yeah,
could
sure.
send her an email with a list of shorebirds.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to send it to me, then I can send it out to people too. And
Okay, perfect.
yeah, we can also put it on the website as well,
Yeah.
and then people can access it from there.
Okay,
Um,
awesome.
do you know if some species are disappearing faster than others?
Yes, so there's definitely species that are at greater risk, and they are definitely declining faster. So some of the endangered species that we get in Canada and at Chaplin are the piping plover. They're pretty charismatic,
Hmm.
and a lot of people know about piping plover decline. And then red knots are really common at Reed Lake, which is part of the WZURN site with Chaplin, and they are also endangered and declining. So not all shorebirds are declining as much as others. The ones that kind of breed locally in the prairies seem to be doing a bit better than those that are breeding up in the Arctic. Although piping plovers breed locally, so that's not entirely true, but the
What
ones
is
that
the
are breeding in
most
the Arctic are more at risk.
okay? What is the most unusual species that you've seen there? Like something that you weren't expecting to see?
I think I've seen a snowy plover there a year or so ago, and their range is more south. Um, so that was probably the weirdest species that I've seen at Chaplin.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a snowy plover before. I
Yeah,
saw
it
a
was a pretty
black-bellied.
cool sighting.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen a black-bellied one before, and it was really, really like I would
Oh, they're
consider them a once in a
beautiful.
lifetime. Yeah,
Yeah,
they really are. They
they're
kind
just
of
like
remind me of
pieces
like
of art.
yes, that's a really good way to put it. It reminded me of like a capuchin monkey almost. It was
Yeah,
yeah,
I see
it was
that.
fascinating. Sorry, we've got lots of questions here. I should keep moving along. um, are there bird predators that frequent the lake?
Yes, so your basic like raptors, birds of prey are always around and looking to pick off shorebirds. So prairie falcons, Swainson's hawks, red-tailed hawks, all of those are kind of the main predators I think shorebirds face. I'm not sure how much predation they face from on the ground. Like I don't think coyotes are much of a problem. I think it's mostly those raptors and owls and stuff that
Mm,
they're threatened by.
okay, okay. Um, do you ever do any water quality studies there?
So that's actually not part of my work, but there's
Okay.
another student in my lab who is doing the brine shrimp work, and then she's also doing some water quality testing alongside of that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to connect with her in the future
Yeah.
then for a speaker series. um, Sarah's wondering, from your preliminary analysis, what kind of effect do you think the extra water on Chaplin is having on the bird populations?
I'm not sure. So I haven't done too much with the habitat stuff just yet. So I don't know if there's extra water there right now. I don't know if I would put it that way. There might be more water, and I think that that just fluctuates, and the birds are kind of they can kind of adapt to a certain amount of fluctuation in the water that exists on the lake, I guess. So I'm not sure. Um, yeah, I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. Claudia is wondering if you've been able to study, or if you know of any studies that are monitoring their food sources, so the amount of brine shrimp or the other invertebrates, like on a seasonal basis.
Yeah, so again, not me. The other colleague in my lab, she is looking at brine shrimp specifically. So looking at where the brine shrimp are on the lake and in relation to where the shorebirds are going to be on the lake. And I believe she also collected some fecal samples to analyze kind of what's in their poop. Yeah.
Mm.
And like exactly what invertebrates they're eating, whether it's just brine shrimp or if there's other things in there.
Well, yes. It's one of the glorious tasks of being a biologist, I guess, analyzing
Collecting
poop.
poop.
Yeah, they should warn you like when you're, I don't know, first starting your master's or something. By the way, it's not a
Yeah.
glamorous job. Yeah. We have a couple questions about cropland. So Kiana, part of my pronunciation, is wondering if you've looked at the impacts of the amount of cropland versus pasture land surrounding the lake and the impacts on shorebirds.
So that is part of my project. I haven't actually gotten into the weeds of like seeing how that impacts them entirely, but like that will
Mhm.
be part of what I'm producing in my thesis.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, I'm
Um,
definitely interested in looking at that, and I am looking at that. I just don't have a distinct answer for you right now.
um, So Anne is saying, Anne McKellar, who did a presentation for us in April of last year about terns, she says, I noticed that there appeared to be less crop area at Chaplin in 2022 compared to earlier years. Are you seeing that type of pattern across your sites?
Yeah, no, I actually am seeing the opposite across most of my sites where pasture land is being converted into cropland, which is interesting. But yeah, so that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing at the other lakes that I'm studying, whereas Chaplin, yeah, the cropland has decreased.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm curious if there's any like organizations that are in touch with the landowners about cropland conversion. Like I know in the sod area, there's some really
Mm,
cool work going on, and I just heard about I heard a presentation about the Saskatchewan Stock Growers Foundation, and they've got some really exciting stuff happening for next year. But I don't know if Chaplin would be like in that area would be eligible for it, being that they're outside the
yeah,
sod area. So yeah, something to think about for the future. And
for
mhm,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Um, Isabella is wondering if you have had any challenges of doing research on a species that has such a large range in habitat.
It's definitely challenging, but I think that's why I focused my study on their stopover period. I'm not trying to look at them in Chile and in the Arctic because that's just going to be far too much. Um, which is part of the reason why they're so difficult to study and why they're quite an understudied group is because of that big range. So yeah, I think narrowing that down and focusing on migration has kind of helped tackle that challenge.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Um, Somebody has written in about predators. So the main threats to nesting plovers are ground squirrels, raccoons, skunk, and gulls.
Yeah, I
Um,
realized I forgot to mention the nests when
no
we moved
problem.
on. Yes.
Do you want to add any comments or anything?
No, that seems correct.
Okay, okay, thanks. And then somebody's wondering, Deb is wondering, when is the best time to view migration? Either in the spring or the fall, or do you have a preference?
So the best time is kind of mid-May to early June. That's kind of
Mhm.
when the shorebirds peak at Chaplin and at other lakes in the province. And then in the fall, it'll be like early August, kind of late July. And
Mhm.
then even late August, you can get quite a lot of birds, but those are kind of the main times where you can go and see those big flocks is during their migration period in May and June, and then July and August.
Okay, perfect. And
Generally,
I think this is the time of
generally
year.
spring has more birds than fall. So if you want to go out in the spring, which would be that May, June period, spring is usually better.
Okay. And I think this is the time of year when there's mostly the snow geese that are there.
Yes.
Yeah, which is still really cool to see.
Yeah, there's so many of them.
And Isabella is wondering if you have any tips for getting into bird watching.
Ooh, get a pair of binoculars, even if they're not like they can be cheap. Just invest in some kind of binoculars, and that will really help you get closer to the birds. And then I also would recommend the Merlin birding app. It's on like the App
Mm.
Store. It's called Merlin, and it's really good. It will like kind of filter the birds that you see based on where you are, and that can be really helpful when you're new to birding to kind of know what you're supposed to see. And then also you can listen to calls and look at pictures on that app as well. And you can do all of that offline. So if um, you don't have access to internet, like you're in the middle of nowhere, then it still works if you've downloaded it.
Okay. Oh, that's really neat. I've heard that one referred to a few times, so I think I need to
It's so good.
download it and figure it
Yeah.
out. Yeah, awesome. Um, there's a question from Claudia. Are there any estimates as to what the average flight distance is within a day or week for the migratory species?
There definitely are, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. They will fly for several days at a time,
Mm.
without stopping. I don't remember exact distances. I'm sorry.
And are they usually flying at night or during the day, or kind of it depends by the species?
I think they fly mostly at night, although I could be incorrect on that one. Like I'm not positive. Yeah, I think it's mostly at night, and it might depend on the species. I'm not sure.
Okay, perfect. Um, and then there's just a request to go back to this your slide about Chaplin Lake being formed, and Mary Lou
Oh,
just says
absolutely.
sorry for being late. Is Chaplin Lake naturally salty? And I know that you'd covered that part. You had a really good slide. That I've always wondered, like, how did it get to be salty?
Yeah.
Yes, that diagram there.
Yeah, so it's the evapotranspiration causing more salts to be in the water and in the area. Because evapotranspiration in the area exceeds precipitation, it leads to a saltier environment, basically.
Mhm. Do you have any thoughts or comments about the impact of the Trans-Canada Highway on migratory birds there?
I'm not sure. I don't know how long that section of highway has been near Chaplin. I think it's been quite a
Mhm.
while. So I'm not positive on that. And the road doesn't run through the lake. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
just
and I think
nearby.
like I know there can be strikes, like cars can hit birds. And obviously that's a risk that they have to look at. But yeah, I'm not positive on that.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be interesting. From just a average ordinary citizen's perspective, driving by and being able to see the lake or pull over on my way to Regina or something and be like, wow, they're beautiful. Look at that. That's really
Yeah.
neat. That's kind of like I've always appreciated the opportunity to kind of have this short viewing, like the viewing opportunities, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I think that's the other
but
side of it where we need to make certain
yeah.
things accessible, so that people can appreciate
Mhm.
it and kind of want to conserve these areas. If you can't see it, you don't think about it and you're not gonna
Yeah,
care.
yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah,
And
there's
I've
definitely
never even
risks associated with it, but it
Mhm.
may ignite more people's passions to conserve these areas. So who knows?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I've never really thought about like the impact of, the sounds of the highway or like what you mentioned is the strikes, the wildlife, like the bird vehicle collisions. And
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, you should do a
sure.
PhD and see how much of an impact it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, perfect. And Jan is wondering if you know how long a shorebird lives on average.
I believe it's 12 years, I think. That's for semi-palmated sandpipers, but that's the only number that is coming to my head. I might quickly Google that, but I'm not, I think about 12 years.
Wow, okay. And somebody else just commented, and one section of the highway close to the lake is a relatively minor threat, given that all the threats they face traveling intercontinentally each year. I guess that makes sense. Yeah. Um, do you know much about the impact of mining on the shorebirds there? Do you think
It
that they're there
seems
because of the mining, or a bit of a chicken and the egg question?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's the chicken and the egg. I think they would be there either way if there was enough water to support them. Otherwise, they would, disperse to other lakes that had water. I'm not
Mhm.
super positive about any pollutants or anything that mining causes, and if that affects them in any way. But that is something that to consider for shorebirds. Yeah, as like they're still there and they still show up in very large numbers. So I'm not seeing the mine as having a huge negative impact on them.
Yeah, yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, that's kind of all the questions we have at the moment. We'll give everyone one final minute to get the last of your questions in. And I'll just remind everyone that when you leave today's webinar, there'll be a quick 1-minute survey that pops up. So if you don't mind filling that up, then it helps us keep our Native Prairie speaker series going on into the future. And I want to let everyone know that we had a couple in-person presentations, and there was one about grassland songbirds. So I will be posting that on YouTube and probably after Thanksgiving. The in-person ones take a little bit more processing time to be able to do that. Um, yeah, but I don't see any more questions coming in. There's a few comments. Thanks for the great presentation. So maybe I'll just reiterate that. That was really awesome, Kayla. And
Thank you.
this is the first time we've had anybody talk about Chaplin. So it's yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Oh, one question, and it's a good one. Have you noted any issues with avian flu there?
At Chaplin, um,
Yeah.
or my cat just fell. um, I personally haven't seen too much. At Reed Lake, I know there were a few dead pelicans
Mhm.
earlier in the spring that I saw, but I didn't see too much of an impact at Chaplin or much of an impact on shorebirds. I kind of more saw it in pelicans and
Mhm.
geese and other species. The shorebirds, for the most part, seemed okay, but they're also smaller, so I might have missed them if they're like kind of
Mhm.
not doing so great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And do you know if any cranes migrate through there?
I don't know if I've actually seen sandhill cranes at Chaplin, but I think it's because I'm there a bit too early. I'm sure that they stop in the area, and they'll probably be around. Yeah,
And do you do any work with the Chaplin Nature Center at all?
a little bit. I mean, I not like a super amount, but they're
Mhm.
great and they have really great resources and information in there, and it's a great little tourist stop if you want to stop in and learn more about the birds. It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
And somebody had a question about if it was still open for the year, but
No, I don't think
I
it
saw
is.
on their yeah, I saw on their Facebook September 1st that they are closed for the season, unfortunately. It's
Yeah, they should be open next summer though.
okay, awesome. Yeah, perfect. And I wonder if that festival will be revived. Did you ever go to that?
There was the festival. It happened this year, and I did go, and it was
Okay.
yeah, it was good.
Okay,
Yeah, so
cool.
hopefully that'll happen
Um,
again next year, but it did happen in 2022.
okay, perfect. I guess I had to do a COVID break.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, do you know when it opens for the season?
I'm not positive. Sometime in May or early June, I would guess. But yeah, I'm not positive on that.
Okay. And then somebody's written in that if people want to see the effects of HPAI, to check out the CFIA HPAI dashboard online. Um, this is a reference for
Good to
everybody.
know.
So yeah, yeah. Um, well, I think that's kind of all the questions that we have. So again, I want to um, Oh, highly pathogenic avian flu. I knew it was something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. But yeah, many people are typing in, thank you, best wishes on your master's research. Thanks for the great presentation. So I really want to reiterate that. So thank you so much, Kayla, for sharing your knowledge and enthusiasm with us today.
Thanks,
Um,
everyone.
to all of our listeners, thanks for catching today's broadcast. You're welcome to follow up if you missed something on the YouTube channel and check out our other webinars that we have there. Anne McKellar's one about terns from April is on there. And you can always just search on our YouTube channel for a species specific one or a specific presenter. So it's a great resource. So with that, thanks so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.